The night was quiet, too quiet. Have you ever felt that silence? The kind that creeps into your bones and makes your skin crawl? That's how it felt in the big, empty office building. Jason had just started his new job as a security guard, working the night shift. He thought it would be easy money. After all, what could happen in an empty office building overnight? The building was massive, with long, cold hallways that seemed to stretch forever. The lights were dim, flickering every so often as if they could go out at any moment. Jason had been given a flashlight and a radio. He laughed to himself, thinking, what am I going to do with these? Scare away ghosts. Little did he know, that thought might not be too far off. Jason settled into the tiny security office on the first floor. He had a small desk with a bunch of old monitors showing grainy footage from the security cameras. He also had a coffee machine that made the worst coffee he'd ever tasted. But it didn't matter. He was determined to stay awake. Or was he? It was around 1 a.m. when Jason first heard it. A faint sound like footsteps. But it couldn't be. Could it? He leaned toward the monitors, scanning them for any signs of movement. Nothing. The hallways were empty. Maybe he was just hearing things. After all, the building was old. Old buildings make noises, right? But the sound didn't stop. Tap, tap, tap. It was soft at first, almost like someone was walking barefoot. Jason grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the office. Hello, he called out. His voice echoed down the empty hallway. No answer. He walked toward the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt silly. Maybe it was just a rat or some other small animal. But as he got closer, the sound grew louder, and it didn't sound like an animal anymore. It sounded like someone dragging their feet. Jason's flashlight flickered as he turned the corner. There was nothing there, just an empty hallway lined with closed office doors. He shook the flashlight and muttered to himself, cheap piece of junk. But then he noticed something on the floor, a wet footprint. Just one. It was small, like a child's, and it led to one of the doors. Is someone here? He asked again, his voice trembling. He didn't expect an answer, and he didn't get one. But he could feel it now, that eerie sensation, like someone was watching him. Have you ever felt that? Like eyes were boring into your back, even though you couldn't see anyone? Jason reached for the door handle. It was cold, colder than it should have been. He opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking like they hadn't been oiled in years. The room was empty, just a desk, a chair, and a dusty computer. But then he saw it. Another wet footprint, leading to the corner of the room. His flashlight beam followed the trail, and his heart stopped. In the corner stood a small figure, its back turned to him. It looked like a child, but something was wrong. Its shoulders were hunched, and its head was tilted at an unnatural angle. Jason's breath caught in his throat. Hey, kid, he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you lost? The figure didn't move. Jason took a step closer, and that's when it turned around. Its face, if you could call it that, was pale and featureless, like a mask with no eyes, no mouth. Jason stumbled back, dropping his flashlight. Darkness swallowed the room, and he heard a sound that would haunt him forever, a low, guttural laugh. Jason scrambled to pick up his flashlight, his hands shaking. When he turned it back on, the figure was gone, but the laugh lingered, echoing in his ears. He bolted out of the room, his heart racing. Back in the security office, he locked the door and tried to calm down. Maybe he was imagining things. He hadn't slept well in days. That had to be it, right? But then the monitors flickered. One by one, the screens went dark, except for one. It showed the hallway outside the security office. And there, standing just outside the door, was the figure. Its blank face stared directly at the camera. Jason froze. What would you do in that situation? Would you open the door? Would you run? Jason grabbed his radio and called for help. This is Jason. I need backup at the office building. There's someone here. I don't know what it is, but His voice trailed off as the radio crackled with static. Then, through the static, he heard the laugh again. It was coming from the radio now. The door handle jiggled. Jason's eyes darted to it, his mind racing. He backed away, clutching his flashlight like it was the only thing keeping him alive. The handle stopped moving, and the room fell silent. But the silence was worse than the noise. It was heavy, suffocating. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered and went out. Jason was plunged into darkness. He fumbled with his flashlight, his breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. When he finally got it working, he wished he hadn't. The figure was inside the room now, standing in the corner, its head tilted at that unnatural angle. "What do you want?" Jason shouted, his voice cracking. The figure didn't answer. It just stood there, silent and still. Jason took a step back, and that's when he noticed something else. There were more footprints, wet and small, appearing on the floor one by one, coming toward him. He couldn't take it anymore. Jason bolted out of the office, not caring where he was going as long as it was away from that thing. The hallway seemed longer now, twisting and turning in ways that didn't make sense. He could hear the footsteps behind him, faster now, chasing him. But when he looked back, there was nothing there. Jason finally found himself in the stairwell. He ran up, thinking he could hide on one of the upper floors. But as he climbed, he realized something was wrong. The stairs didn't end. He kept going up and up, but there was no door, no landing. Just endless stairs. Have you ever had a nightmare like that? Where no matter how far you go, you can't escape. Out of breath, Jason stopped. He leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of what was happening. That's when he heard it again. The laugh. This time it was closer. He turned around, and there it was, standing on the stairs below him. Its head was tilted even more now, almost upside down, and it was smiling, not with a mouth, but with its whole face, stretching and twisting in a way that made Jason's stomach churn. He screamed and ran, taking the stairs two at a time. He didn't care where they led anymore. He just needed to get away, but the stairs seemed to go on forever. His legs burned. His lungs felt like they would burst, but he couldn't stop. The figure was following him, its laughter growing louder and more distorted. Finally, Jason burst through a door and found himself on the roof. The cold night air hit him like a slap to the face. He looked around, but there was nowhere to go. The figure was there, standing in the doorway, blocking his escape. Jason backed away until he was at the edge of the roof. "Stay back," he shouted, though he knew it wouldn't listen. The figure took a step forward, then another. Jason's foot slipped, and he almost fell. He looked down and saw the city below him, tiny and far away. He had no choice. He jumped. For a moment, there was nothing, just the sensation of falling. Then Jason hit the ground, or at least he thought he did. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the security office, sitting at the desk. The monitors were working, the lights were on, and everything seemed normal. Had it all been a dream? Jason rubbed his face, trying to shake off the lingering fear. But then he noticed something on the desk, a single wet footprint. His heart sank. He looked at the monitors, and there it was, standing in the hallway, its blank face staring directly at the camera. Jason never worked another night shift again. And as for the building, well, it's still there, waiting for its next victim. So tell me, would you take a job like that? Would you dare to find out what lurks when the lights go out? If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling tales, don't forget to subscribe. There's always more lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. Do you dare to explore them with us?